The morning sun blazed over the military training ground as recruits assembled in perfectly straight lines. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and determination. Sergeant Maya Rodriguez stood among the other soldiers, her posture straight and her eyes focused ahead. She had been transferred to this new base only 3 weeks ago. And today was the first major physical training assessment for all personnel. Captain Ree. Derek Morrison walked along the line of soldiers, his boots crunching against the gravel. He was known throughout the base as a strict officer who believed in discipline above all else. His reputation preceded him. Stories circulated about how he had made soldiers do push-ups until they collapsed, how he never accepted excuses, and how he believed that any soldier who could not meet physical standards had no place in the military. Maya felt his presence before she saw him. He stopped directly in front of her, his shadow falling across her face. She could see his jaw tighten as he looked down at the medical exemption form clipped to her uniform. The paper fluttered slightly in the morning breeze. "Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying across the field. Other soldiers glanced over, curious about the interaction. "I see you have a medical exemption from today's physical assessment." Maya nodded once, keeping her expression neutral. "Yes, sir." It was approved by the base medical officer. Captain Morrison picked up the exemption form and read it slowly, his eyebrows furrowing with each line. "Permanent physical training modifications due to combat-related injury," he read aloud, making sure everyone nearby could hear. How convenient. Several soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Maya remained still, her hands clasped behind her back. She had expected this reaction. It happened at every new posting, with every new commanding officer who did not know her history. "You know what I think, Rodriguez?" Captain Morrison continued, stepping closer. "I think too many soldiers these days are looking for ways to get out of hard work. A little pain here, a small complaint there, and suddenly they have a medical exemption." Maya's jaw clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "Sir, my exemption is legitimate and was thoroughly reviewed." "Thoroughly reviewed?" he repeated mockingly. "I have been in this military for 20 years, Rodriguez. I have seen countless soldiers try to game the system. Young people who think they can wear the uniform without putting in the effort." The other soldiers on the field had stopped their warm-up exercises. All eyes were now on the confrontation. Maya could feel their stares, could sense their judgment. She was the new person, the outsider with special treatment. Without context, she understood how it looked. Captain Morrison waved the exemption form in the air. "This piece of paper says you cannot participate in running, cannot do standard push-ups, cannot engage in high-impact activities. So tell me, Sergeant, what exactly can you do? Why should you be here taking up a position that could go to a soldier who is actually capable?" Maya took a slow breath. She had heard variations of this speech before. Officers who believed they knew everything, who thought combat was only measured in push-ups and mile times. They did not understand that courage came in many forms. That sacrifice could not be quantified by a fitness test. "I can do my job." "Sir," she said simply, "your job." Captain Morrison laughed without humor. "Your job is to be a soldier, Rodriguez. That means physical readiness. That means being able to carry a wounded comrade off the battlefield. That means having the strength and endurance to complete missions under extreme conditions." He turned to address the assembled soldiers. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. The standards exist for a reason. We cannot have weak links in our chain. Every soldier must be capable, must be strong, must be willing to push through pain and discomfort." Maya felt heat rising in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. Getting angry would only prove his point, would only make her look like someone who could not handle criticism. Captain Morrison turned back to her, his eyes cold. "I will be watching you, Rodriguez. Medical exemption or not, you will prove to me that you deserve to wear that uniform. And if you cannot, I will personally recommend your transfer to a desk position where you can shuffle papers without putting real soldiers at risk." He dropped the exemption form back onto her clipboard and walked away, his boots striking the ground with authority. The other soldiers slowly returned to their exercises. Though many continued to glance at Maya with a mixture of pity and suspicion, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, who had been observing from the sidelines, approached Maya quietly. "Do not let him get to you," she whispered. "Morrison is old school. He does not understand that warfare has changed." Maya nodded her thanks, but said nothing. Words felt inadequate in this moment. She had not asked for special treatment. She had not wanted to be singled out or made an example of. All she wanted was to serve, to continue the work she had dedicated her life to. Despite what had happened, as the training session began, Maya moved to the side of the field where she had been instructed to complete modified exercises. While other soldiers ran laps around the track, she worked on upper body strength exercises that did not involve her lower back and legs. While they did jumping jacks and burpees, she did modified versions that accommodated her limitations. Throughout the session, Captain Morrison made pointed comments. When soldiers complained about being tired, he would gesture toward Maya. "At least you are actually training," he would say. "At least you are not sitting on the sidelines with a convenient excuse." By the end of the 2-hour session, every soldier on that field knew Maya's name and knew that she was different. She was the one who could not keep up, the one who needed special accommodations, the one who did not belong. Maya gathered her equipment as the session ended. Her modified workout had been just as challenging as the regular one, targeting different muscle groups and requiring different techniques. But nobody saw that. They only saw what she could not do, not what she could. As she walked back toward the barracks, she overheard 2 young privates talking. "Can you believe they let someone like that stay on active duty?" one said. "If you cannot do the basic physical requirements, you should not be here." "Maybe she has connections," the other replied. "Maybe she knows someone high up who pulled strings for her." Maya kept walking, her face expressionless. She had learned long ago that defending herself only made things worse. People believed what they wanted to believe. They created narratives that fit their worldview. Back in her quarters, Maya removed her combat boots and sat on the edge of her bed. Her body ached, not from the workout, but from the tension of holding everything inside. The anger, the frustration, the deep unfairness of being judged by someone who knew nothing about her. She looked down at her uniform jacket. At the ribbons and badges that told a story, Captain Morrison had not bothered to read. Among them was a Purple Heart, a combat action badge, and several unit citations. But these meant nothing to someone who had already decided she was weak. Maya had survived 3 tours overseas. She had led soldiers through hostile territory. She had made life and death decisions under fire. And she had paid a price that most people could never understand. But tomorrow, she would return to that training field. She would endure more comments, more doubt, more assumptions, because that was what soldiers did. They persevered, even when the enemy was not a foreign combatant, but prejudice and ignorance, as the sun set outside her window. Maya made a decision. She would not let Captain Morrison's words define her. She would not let his narrow understanding of strength diminish what she had accomplished. But she also knew that eventually the truth would need to come out. Eventually, she would need to show him exactly why she had earned that medical exemption. The question was not if, but when. The following weeks became a test of endurance that had nothing to do with physical fitness. Captain Morrison seemed to make it his personal mission to highlight Maya's limitations at every opportunity. During morning formations, he would call her out. During briefings, he would make comments about soldiers who could not pull their weight. During training exercises, he would assign her to positions that emphasized what she could not do, rather than what she could, Maya maintained. Her composure through it all? She arrived early to every formation, completed every modified exercise with precision, and performed her actual job duties flawlessly. Her work in intelligence analysis was exceptional. She had a gift for seeing patterns others missed, for connecting seemingly unrelated pieces of information into coherent threat assessments. But Captain Morrison did not care about intelligence work. He cared about soldiers who could run 5 miles without stopping, who could do 100 push-ups without breaking form, who fit his definition of what a warrior should be. The other soldiers on base had mixed reactions to the ongoing tension. Some, like Lieutenant Chen, quietly supported Maya and made efforts to include her. Others kept their distance, not wanting to associate with someone the captain had marked as unworthy. A few seemed to enjoy the drama, treating it like entertainment to break up the monotony of daily military life. Private First Class Tommy Wells, one of the younger soldiers who had initially bought into Captain Morrison's narrative. He had watched Maya's modified training sessions with skepticism, had laughed at some of the captain's pointed comments, had assumed that she was indeed getting special treatment she did not deserve. But Tommy's perspective began to shift during a routine intelligence briefing. Maya stood at the front of the room, presenting analysis on potential security threats in their operational area. She spoke with clarity and confidence, breaking down complex geopolitical situations into understandable tactical implications. The pattern of activity in Sectors 4 and 7 suggests a coordinated effort, Maya explained, pointing to a map on the screen. If we cross-reference this with communication intercepts from the past 2 weeks, we can predict with reasonable certainty that an incident will occur in this region within the next 72 hours. Major Phillips, the base commander, who oversaw intelligence operations, nodded approvingly. Excellent analysis, Sergeant Rodriguez. This is exactly the kind of proactive thinking that saves lives. After the briefing, Tommy approached Lieutenant Chen. She really knows her stuff, he said. Sounding surprised, Chen gave him a knowing look. Rodriguez has more combat experience than most soldiers twice her age. She has been in situations you cannot even imagine. Maybe instead of judging her by what she cannot do in physical training, you should pay attention to what she brings to this unit. The comment stuck with Tommy. He started watching Maya more carefully, noticing details he had missed before. He saw how other intelligence personnel sought her advice. He observed how she mentored younger analysts with patience and genuine investment in their development. He noticed the respect she received from officers who actually worked with her, as opposed to those who only saw her during physical training. But Captain Morrison remained unmoved. If anything, his criticism intensified. During a combined unit training exercise, he assigned Maya to a logistics role that kept her away from the main action. When her intelligence assessment proved crucial to the exercise's success, he attributed it to luck rather than skill. Anyone can look at a map and make predictions, he said dismissively when another officer praised Maya's contribution. What matters is whether a soldier can perform when bullets are flying. The statement hung in the air awkwardly. Several officers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the captain's continued fixation on discrediting Maya. But military hierarchy being what it was, no one directly challenged him. Maya heard about the comment secondhand. She was in the intelligence office, reviewing satellite imagery, when Lieutenant Chen mentioned it. He is relentless, Chen said, frustration evident in her voice. I do not understand why he has made this so personal. Maya did not look up from her work. Some people need someone to look down on. It makes them feel superior. I have dealt with worse. You should not have to deal with it at all, Chen insisted. You could file a complaint. His behavior is bordering on harassment. What would that accomplish? Maya asked, finally meeting Chen's eyes. It would make me look weak, like I cannot handle criticism. It would give him ammunition to claim I am thin-skinned, and it would create division in the unit when we need to work together. Chen sighed, knowing Maya was right, but hating the situation anyway. So you were just going to let him keep attacking you? I'm going to do my job, Maya said simply. Eventually, the truth has a way of coming out. That truth came closer to surfacing during an unexpected late-night emergency. Maya was working late in the intelligence office when an urgent communication came through. There had been a security breach at a forward operating base, 200 miles away. Multiple casualties reported. Immediate threat assessment needed. Maya immediately began pulling together information. She contacted sources, reviewed recent intelligence reports, cross-referenced known threat actors, and within 2 hours had compiled a comprehensive brief. But she needed authorization to send it through official channels. And the only senior officer on base at that hour was Captain Morrison. She found him in his office reviewing paperwork. He looked up with obvious annoyance when she knocked. Rodriguez. What do you want? Sir, there has been an incident at FOB Falcon. I have completed a threat assessment that needs to go up the chain immediately. Lives may depend on this information reaching the right people quickly. Captain Morrison held out his hand for the report. Maya passed it to him, watching as he skimmed through her analysis. His expression remained skeptical. This seems like speculation. You are connecting events that may not be related. Sir, with respect, the pattern is clear. If my assessment is correct, there will be a follow-up attack within the next 12 hours. The units in that area need to adjust their defensive posture. And if you are wrong, Morrison challenged. If we send out alerts based on your hunches and nothing happens, we look foolish. Resources get diverted for no reason. Kept her voice steady. Sir, I stand by my analysis. The indicators are there for anyone trained to see them. Morrison studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he signed the authorization and handed it back. Fine. But if this turns out to be nothing, it will be noted in your record. Maya took the report and hurried to transmit it through secure channels. As she worked, she felt a mixture of frustration and determination. Her analysis was solid. She knew it the same way she knew when a mission was about to go wrong. The same instinct that had kept her alive through multiple combat deployments. 8 hours later, as dawn broke over the base, confirmation came through. There had been an attempted attack on 3 forward positions in the exact area Maya had identified. Because of her warning, units had been prepared. The attack had been repelled with minimal casualties. Major Phillips personally came to the intelligence office to commend Maya. Outstanding work, Sergeant. Your assessment was precise and timely. You very likely saved lives last night. News of the successful prediction spread through the base. Soldiers who had been dismissive of Maya began to see her differently. She was not just someone with a medical exemption. She was someone whose skills and judgment could mean the difference between life and death. But even this success did not change Captain Morrison's attitude. When Phillips mentioned Maya's contribution during a command briefing, Morrison simply nodded without comment. He refused to acknowledge that perhaps he had misjudged her. That perhaps physical prowess was not the only measure of a soldier's worth. Private Wells, who had completed his own transformation from skeptic to supporter, could not contain his frustration. He spoke to other young soldiers in his unit. How can he still act like she does not belong here? She literally saved lives. What more does she need to prove? An older sergeant overheard the conversation and pulled Wells aside. Listen, kid. Morrison comes from a different era. He saw combat when warfare was different, when physical strength was the most important factor. He lost soldiers under his command, good people who were physically fit but still did not make it home. That kind of trauma changes you. Sometimes it makes you rigid, makes you cling to the things you think you can control. But that is not fair to Sergeant Rodriguez, Wells protested. No, it is not, the sergeant agreed. But life is not fair, especially in the military. All Rodriguez can do is keep proving herself and hope that eventually the truth breaks through. Maya continued her work, aware of the shifting perceptions around her, but focused on the mission. She had not joined the military for recognition or approval. She had joined to serve, to protect, to make a difference. The opinions of one rigid officer, while frustrating, would not deter her from that purpose. But she also knew that the confrontation was building towards something. Captain Morrison's pride was wounded by her success. He had staked his reputation on the belief that she was weak, that she did not belong. Her continued excellence challenged that narrative. And people who felt threatened often became more aggressive, more desperate to prove they were right. Maya could feel the tension building like pressure before a storm. Something would give eventually. The question was what form that breaking point would take. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning during Navy, what should have been a routine unit formation. The entire base had assembled for a special address from visiting General Patricia Hammond, a decorated officer known for her progressive approach to military readiness and her advocacy for wounded warriors returning to active duty. General Hammond stood at the podium, her presence commanding respect from every soldier present. She spoke about the evolving nature of warfare, about how modern military operations required diverse skills and capabilities. She talked about technological warfare, intelligence operations, and the importance of adapting to new realities rather than clinging to outdated models. The military of today is not the military of 20 years ago, General Hammond said, her voice carrying across the assembled formation. We face threats that cannot be defeated by physical strength alone. We need soldiers who can think critically, who can analyze complex situations, who bring diverse experiences and perspectives to our operations. Captain Morrison stood among the other officers, his jaw tight. Maya could see the tension in his posture, even from where she stood in formation. Everything the general was saying contradicted his worldview, challenged the beliefs he had built his career upon. General Hammond continued, I have reviewed the recent performance reports from this base. I want to specifically commend the intelligence unit for their outstanding work. There was an incident last week where quick analysis and decisive action prevented what could have been a catastrophic attack. That kind of work exemplifies the excellence we need from every soldier. She paused, looking down at her notes. Sergeant Maya Rodriguez, please step forward. Maya felt every eye on the field turn toward her. She maintained her composure and stepped out of formation, marching crisply to stand before the general. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm and professional. Sergeant Rodriguez, General Hammond said, your threat assessment last week was exceptional. Your ability to synthesize complex information and provide actionable intelligence saved lives. On behalf of the entire command structure, I want to thank you for your service and dedication. The general extended her hand. Maya shook it firmly, murmuring her thanks. As she returned to formation, she caught a glimpse of Captain Morrison's face. It was red with barely contained anger, his hands clenched at his sides. After the ceremony ended and General Hammond had departed, the soldiers began to disperse for their daily duties. Maya was heading toward the intelligence office when she heard Captain Morrison's voice behind her. Rodriguez. My office. Now. She turned and followed him, knowing this confrontation had been inevitable. Lieutenant Chen, who had witnessed the exchange, looked worried, but could do nothing to intervene. Inside his office, Captain Morrison closed the door with more force than necessary. He did not offer Maya a seat, instead, standing behind his desk with his arms crossed. I want to know what strings you pulled to get that commendation. Did you contact the general's office directly? Did you manipulate the report to make yourself look better? Maya remained at attention. Sir, I did not contact anyone. One submitted my threat assessment through proper channels. Any recognition came from the chain of command reviewing the results. Don't lie to me, Morrison snapped. I know how this works. I know how people play politics, how they network and maneuver to advance their careers. You have been trying to undermine me since you arrived at this base. Sir, I have done nothing but my job, Maya said, her voice steady, despite the anger building inside her. I have followed every order, completed every task assigned to me, and contributed to this unit's mission to the best of my ability. Your ability, Morrison repeated mockingly. Your ability is limited, Sergeant. You cannot perform basic physical tasks that every other soldier manages without complaint. You hide behind a medical exemption while real soldiers do the hard work. Something in Maya's restraint began to crack. She had endured weeks of this treatment, had absorbed countless insults and dismissive comments, had proven herself repeatedly only to have her accomplishments diminished. But this accusation that she was hiding, that she was avoiding hard work, cut deeper than the others. Permission to speak freely, sir? She asked, her voice tight. Morrison waved his hand dismissively. Go ahead. Tell me whatever excuse you have prepared. Maya took a breath, choosing her words carefully. Sir, you have made assumptions about me from the moment I arrived on this base. You saw my medical exemption and decided I was weak, that I was looking for special treatment. You never asked about the circumstances that led to that exemption. You never inquired about my service record. You simply judged me based on what I cannot do rather than what I have done. Because what you have done does not matter if you cannot meet basic standards, Morrison interrupted. The military is not a charity organization. We cannot accommodate everyone who wants to wear the uniform but cannot handle the physical demands. I have handled demands you cannot imagine, Maya said, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself. I have served in combat zones. I have led soldiers under fire. I have made decisions that determined whether people lived or died. And yes, I paid a price for that service. But that price does not make me weak, sir. It makes me experienced. Morrison leaned forward, his eyes cold. Experience means nothing if you are a liability on the battlefield. Tell me, Rodriguez, if this base came under attack right now, could you carry a wounded soldier to safety? Could you run to cover while under fire? Could you physically defend yourself in hand-to-hand combat? Some of those things would be difficult, Maya admitted. But I could do other things. I could coordinate defensive positions. I could analyze attack patterns and predict enemy movements. I could provide intelligence that prevents soldiers from being wounded in the first place. Warfare is not just about individual physical capability, sir. It is about using every resource and skill set to achieve the mission. That is the kind of reasoning that gets people killed, Morrison said harshly. That is the kind of soft thinking that has weakened our military. In my day, every soldier was a rifleman first. Every soldier could be counted on to fight when needed. Your day is over, sir, Maya said quietly, and immediately regretted the words. She had gone too far, had let her frustration override her professionalism. Morrison's face turned purple with rage. How dare you? How dare you speak to me that way? I have dedicated my life to this military, have sacrificed more than you could possibly understand, and I will not stand here and be lectured by someone who cannot even complete a simple physical training session. I will not stand here and be called weak by someone who knows nothing about what I have sacrificed. Maya shot back, her composure finally breaking. You want to know about my medical exemption, Captain? You want to know why I cannot run obstacle courses or do jumping jacks? Fine, I will show you. She reached for the zipper of her uniform jacket, her hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. She had sworn she would not do this, would not use her injury as a shield or a weapon. But Captain Morrison had pushed her past her limit. He wanted proof. He would get it. What are you doing? Morrison demanded, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. Maya pulled off her jacket, revealing the t-shirt underneath. Then, without breaking eye contact with the captain, she turned around and lifted the back of her shirt. The office fell silent. Morrison's expression transformed from anger to shock as he saw what Maya had been hiding beneath her uniform. The medical exemptions suddenly made perfect sense. The limitations on physical activity became instantly understandable, and the judgments he had made, the accusations he had leveled, revealed themselves for what they were: ignorant assumptions. Made without knowledge or context, Maya's back told a story that words could not adequately convey. It was a map of sacrifice, a testament to the price she had paid for her service. And as Morrison stared at the evidence of her courage, whatever justifications he had constructed for his behavior crumbled into dust. Maya lowered her shirt and turned back around, meeting the captain's eyes. She said nothing. She did not need to. The scars spoke louder than any defense she could offer, for the first time since she had arrived at the base. Captain Derek Morrison found himself completely speechless. He had built an entire narrative around Maya Rodriguez being weak, being undeserving, being a soldier who wanted recognition without sacrifice. That narrative had just been destroyed by the simple act of showing him the truth. Maya picked up her jacket from where she had draped it over the chair. She pulled it back on slowly, deliberately, giving Morrison time to process what he had seen. When she was fully dressed again, she stood at attention and waited for him to respond. Morrison opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. No words came out. He looked down at his desk, at the papers scattered across it, at anything except Maya. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, Maya spoke. Her voice was calm now, drained of anger. Permission to return to duty, sir? Morrison nodded without looking up. Maya saluted crisply, held it until he automatically returned it, then turned and walked out of his office. As she closed the door behind her, she felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that the truth was finally revealed. Exhaustion from carrying the burden of judgment for so long. And an unexpected sadness that it had to come to this. That someone had to see her scars before they could see her worth. Lieutenant Chen was waiting outside, having clearly been concerned about the heated exchange. She took one look at Maya's face and understood that something significant had happened. Are you okay? She asked gently. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak just yet. Together, they walked toward the intelligence office. Leaving Captain Morrison alone with his thoughts and the weight of his own prejudice, the news of what happened in Captain Morrison's office spread through the base like wildfire. Though not from Maya, she had said nothing about the confrontation, had simply returned to her work as if nothing had occurred. But Lieutenant Chen had shared the broad details with Major Phillips. Believing that the command structure needed to know about Morrison's behavior. From there, word traveled through unofficial channels, the way information always does in military units. The story grew as it passed from person to person. Some versions were exaggerated, some were sympathetic to Maya, and others tried to make excuses for Morrison. But the core truth remained the same. Captain Morrison had spent weeks ridiculing a soldier for her medical exemption without bothering to learn why she had it. And when confronted with the evidence of her sacrifice, he had been forced to reckon with his own ignorance and prejudice the morning after the confrontation. Maya arrived at physical training to find a noticeably different atmosphere. Soldiers who had previously kept their distance now nodded respectfully as she passed. A few offered quiet words of support. Even those who said nothing looked at her differently, with a recognition that had been absent before. Captain Morrison was present for the training session, as was his duty. But he remained silent throughout, making none of his usual pointed comments. He watched the exercises from a distance, his face unreadable. When Maya moved to her area for modified training, he did not follow to make criticisms or suggestions. He simply let her work in peace. Private Wells approached Maya during a water break. He looked nervous but determined. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. I did not understand what you had been through. I made judgments without knowing the facts. That was wrong of me." Maya looked at the young soldier, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes. "Apology accepted, Private. But learn from this. In the military and in life, you will encounter people who do not fit your expectations. The measure of your character is whether you judge them based on their actions and capabilities, or based on superficial observations and assumptions." Wells nodded earnestly. "Yes, ma'am. I will remember that." Over the next several days, Captain Morrison maintained his distance from Maya. He neither sought her out nor went out of his way to avoid her. During briefings and meetings, he was professional but cool. The hostility was gone, replaced by something harder to define. Perhaps it was shame. Perhaps it was a reluctant respect. Perhaps it was simply the discomfort of having been proven wrong so completely. Maya focused on her work, which continued to be exemplary. She helped train new intelligence analysts, reviewed threat assessments, and contributed to operational planning. Her colleagues in the intelligence office had always valued her. Now that appreciation spread to other parts of the base as well. "Major." Phillips called Maya into his office a week after the incident. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I want you to know that I have been reviewing Captain Morrison's conduct toward you. While he has not violated any specific regulations, his behavior has been inappropriate. I have spoken with him about the need to treat all soldiers with the respect they deserve, regardless of physical limitations." "Thank you, sir," Maya said. "I appreciate your support." Phillips leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I also want to tell you that your service record is remarkable. 3 tours of combat duty, multiple commendations. According to the reports from your previous commanders, you are one of the most capable intelligence analysts they have ever worked with. This base is fortunate to have you. I'm just doing my job, sir." "You are doing much more than that," Phillips corrected. "You are setting an example for what dedication and professionalism look like. And you are teaching an important lesson about judging people based on their contributions rather than their limitations." That afternoon, Maya was working in the intelligence office when Captain Morrison appeared in the doorway. Lieutenant Chen and 2 other analysts were also present, but Morrison's attention was fixed on Maya. "Sergeant Rodriguez, may I speak with you privately?" Maya stood and followed him into the hallway. He led her to a quiet corner away from foot traffic, then stood for a moment as if gathering his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than usual, lacking its typical commanding authority. "Sergeant, I owe you an apology. A significant one." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I made assumptions about you that were unfair and uninformed. I judged you based on a medical exemption without understanding the context behind it. That was wrong. Maya said nothing, waiting to hear what else he would say. Morrison continued, his discomfort evident. I come from an era where physical prowess was considered the ultimate measure of a soldier's worth. I saw combat before warfare became what it is today. I lost good soldiers, physically fit soldiers, and I think somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that if everyone just met certain physical standards, we could prevent those losses. It was illogical thinking, but it gave me something to control in situations where control was impossible. Sir, I understand that trauma can shape how we see the world, Maya said carefully, but it does not excuse treating fellow soldiers with disrespect. No, it does not, Morrison agreed, and I am not making excuses. I am trying to explain, though not to justify, why I behaved the way I did. When I saw your exemption, I saw what I thought was weakness. I saw someone trying to take shortcuts. I was completely wrong. He met her eyes directly for the first time. What happened to you? If you are willing to share, I think I need to understand. Maya had known this question would come eventually. She took a breath and decided that Morrison deserved the full truth, not just the glimpse he had gotten from seeing her scars. I was leading a patrol in Afghanistan during my second tour, she began. We received intelligence about a possible insurgent meeting in a compound near our forward operating base. My team went in to investigate. The intelligence was accurate, but what we did not know was that they had prepared an ambush. Morrison listened silently, his earlier defensiveness replaced by focused attention. We came under fire from multiple positions, Maya continued. 2 of my soldiers went down in the initial volley. I called for backup and returned fire, but we were pinned down. I could see one of the wounded soldiers, a kid named Danny Martinez, trying to crawl to cover. He was not going to make it without help. She paused, remembering that moment with painful clarity. I made the decision to go get him. I ran through open ground under heavy fire, reached him, and started dragging him back toward our position. I almost made it. We were maybe 10 feet from cover when an RPG hit the wall beside us. Morrison's jaw tightened, imagining the scene. The explosion threw us both, Maya said. Martinez survived with relatively minor injuries. I took most of the shrapnel in my back and legs. The medic said later that my body had shielded him from the worst of the blast. They called me a hero. I call it doing what any soldier would do for their team. The injuries were extensive? Morrison asked quietly. Back and 17 pieces of shrapnel removed from my back and lower body, Maya confirmed. 3 surgeries to repair damaged muscles and nerves. 8 months of physical therapy. The doctor said I was lucky to walk again at all. But some of the nerve damage was permanent. High-impact activities cause severe pain and can risk further injury, hence the medical exemption. Morrison was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. And I accused you of avoiding hard work, of taking the easy way out, of being weak. He did not know, Maya said, though her tone made it clear that ignorance was not a complete excuse. I should have asked, Morrison replied. I should have looked at your service record before making assumptions. I should have treated you with the respect that every soldier deserves until proven otherwise. Instead, I did the opposite. I am deeply sorry, Sergeant Rodriguez. Maya studied the captain's face, seeing genuine remorse there. Apologies did not erase the weeks of public humiliation and constant criticism, but they were a start. I accept your apology, sir. But I need you to understand something. I am not the only soldier who has returned from deployment with injuries that limit their physical capabilities. There are thousands of us trying to continue serving in whatever capacity we can. Every time you judge one of us based on what we cannot do, rather than what we can contribute, you disrespect the sacrifices we made. You are right, Morrison acknowledged, and I need to do better. I need to update my thinking to match the reality of modern military service. Over the following weeks, a remarkable transformation occurred. Captain Morrison did not suddenly become warm and friendly toward Maya, but his treatment of her changed fundamentally. During physical training sessions, he stopped making pointed comments about exemptions and limitations. Instead, he began acknowledging different forms of contribution and capability. More significantly, he started applying the same principle to other soldiers. When a young corporal struggled with certain exercises due to an old knee injury, Morrison worked with the medical staff to develop appropriate modifications rather than treating the soldier as deficient. When questions arose about accommodating wounded warriors returning to active duty, Morrison advocated for inclusive policies rather than rigid standards. Private Wells, who had witnessed the entire arc of the situation, spoke with other young soldiers about what they could learn from it. Morrison was wrong, he said during a conversation in the barracks, but at least he admitted it and changed. That takes courage too. Not the same kind of courage as running into gunfire, but courage nonetheless. The story of Maya and Captain Morrison became something of a teaching moment on the base. It illustrated the importance of looking beyond surface judgments, of asking questions before making assumptions, and of recognizing that strength comes in many forms. Lieutenant Chen, who had supported Maya throughout the ordeal, expressed satisfaction with how things had evolved. "You changed him," she told Maya one afternoon. "Not just his treatment of you, but his entire approach to evaluating soldiers." Maya shook her head slightly. "I did not change him. I simply showed him something he had refused to see." The decision to change was his own. "Still, not everyone would have handled this situation with your level of dignity and professionalism," Chen said. "You could have filed complaints, created drama, or fought back in ways that would have made everything worse. Instead, you kept doing your job and let your competence speak for itself." "What else could I do?" Maya asked. Getting angry or defensive would only have confirmed his prejudices. The only way to change someone's mind is to consistently prove them wrong through actions rather than arguments. As time passed, the dynamic between Maya and Captain Morrison settled into something that could almost be called mutual respect. They were not friends and would never be close, but they had reached an understanding. Morrison had learned a valuable lesson about humility and open-mindedness. Maya had proven that true strength is not measured by physical capability alone. During a unit formation several months later, Morrison addressed the assembled soldiers about the importance of adaptability in modern military service. "The greatest threat to any organization is rigid thinking," he said. "The belief that there is only one way to be effective, only one type of person who can contribute. I learned that lesson from someone on this base, and it made me a better officer." He did not name Maya specifically, but everyone present knew who he meant. Maya stood in formation, her posture straight and her expression neutral. But Lieutenant Chen caught a glimpse of quiet satisfaction in her eyes. After the formation, as soldiers dispersed to their daily duties, several people made a point to speak with Maya. Young soldiers asked her advice about career development. Fellow intelligence analysts invited her to training sessions. Even some of the older officers who had initially been skeptical now treated her as a valued colleague. Maya accepted all of this with characteristic humility. She had never sought recognition or validation. She had simply wanted to serve, to do her job, to contribute in whatever way she could. The fact that her persistence and competence had changed minds and challenged prejudices was a bonus. But it had never been her primary goal. As the sun set over the base that evening, Maya stood outside the intelligence office, looking across the training grounds where she had faced so much criticism months earlier. Those weeks had been difficult, testing her resolve and forcing her to confront prejudice and ignorance. But she had emerged stronger, having proven not only to Captain Morrison, but to herself that her worth as a soldier was not diminished by her physical limitations. The battle scars on her back were a permanent reminder of what she had sacrificed in service to her country. But they were also proof of her courage, her dedication, and her willingness to put others before herself. Captain Morrison had ridiculed her medical exemption because he saw only what she could not do. But when he finally saw those scars, he understood the full measure of who she was. And in the end, that understanding made all the difference. Not just for Maya, but for every soldier on that base, who learned from their example that judgment without knowledge is always wrong, and that true strength comes in many forms. Maya Rodriguez had fought battles overseas and battles at home. She had faced enemy fire and friendly prejudice, and she had won both fights, not through violence or aggression, but through quiet persistence, undeniable competence, and the simple act of showing the truth when it needed to be seen. The officer had ridiculed her physical training exemption. But when she took off her jacket and exposed her battle scars, everything changed. And that change rippled outward, affecting not just one man's perspective, but an entire unit's understanding of what it means to serve with honor.